Praise Him. We are still in our series, Seasons Change. I want you to see today that there is a time machine. I want you to understand that God never changes, but you will. And we have to be prepared for the things of the future. Your lesson today, there is a period of rebuilding. Whether it's marriages, relationships, regardless of what you may think of a particular person, there is a time to rebuild. And then the outcome, reestablishment or healing, to reset, to rearrange, to restart. Many of us are out of touch with the people that God has called us to serve, to be a part of, because we don't know how to hit that reset button. We don't want to go back to the beginning and say, hey, you know what? Maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe we can approach this another way. And so today we need to talk about rebuilding and reestablishing. Your quote of the morning by Nicholas Sparks, American screenwriter, is the emotion that can break your heart is the same thing. Is sometimes the very one that heals it. It's your English definition. Throughout our series, we have the same English definition. It is season, period, interval, division, occasion, or opportunity. We use the Hebrew word, Strong's transliteration 4150, moed. It is the appointed time. I want you to know that season, the season in your life is synonymous with the Hebrew word, the appointed time, meaning that God has ordained this time in your life. Your three critical points this morning is forgive in time. This is to pardon someone, to absolve someone, to take a step back and say, hey, maybe this person deserves a second chance. And then I want you to see that you need to rebuild in time. You need to restructure. You need to restore. And then your last point of the day is heal in time. The healing that I'm talking about is reconciliation. Think about it. How many of us are no longer walking hand in hand with the person that God has called us to serve or be involved in because we don't know how to forgive? We don't want to accept the healing process. And so today I want to take you to a story in the Bible, very popular story about a guy by the name of Joseph. Moses is our writer. He introduces us to a guy by the name of Joseph in the 37th chapter of Genesis. Now, when this is written, it's not subdivided, but for us, it is subdivided. So in that 37th chapter of Genesis, he lets us know that this guy, Joseph, is so loved by his father, Jacob, that their brothers are jealous of him. One day, the dad sends Joseph up to get an account of his brothers watering the herd. And when he gets there, the brothers are so jealous of him that they actually want to kill him. If it wasn't for Reuben, they would have killed him. But they throw him into a cistern or a hole with water in it. And when the Ishmaelites come along, they sell their brother for 20 shekels of silver. Now, if you're a reader of Genesis, you know that in the 38th chapter, they talk about Tamar, and they're not talking about Joseph. But the story picks up again in chapter 39. Now, Joseph has been sold, and he's in the house of Potiphar. He's charged with attempted rape. And in chapter 40, he's incarcerated, and he runs into a cupbearer and a baker, and he interprets their dreams. In chapter 41, Pharaoh comes to him with a dream. He can't understand it. He's perplexed. Joseph interprets that dream, and he is second in charge of all Egypt. Now, when you get to chapter 42, 43, and 44, you'll see that Joseph is reuniting with his brothers again. He's reconciling. I want to start us at Genesis 45 today. Listen to this, verse 1. Joseph, now we're talking about a guy who went from a shepherd to a convict to king. Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants. And he cried out, "Have everyone leave my presence." So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph." It's 20-something years since he's seen them. A 17-year-old boy traveling over 80 miles to see what his brothers are doing, to report back to his father, doing nothing but obeying his parents. He travels from the Hebron Valley up to Jerusalem, over to Shechem, and then to Dothan before his brothers sell him. Do you know they wanted to actually kill him? He told them about a dream that he had, and they couldn't believe that God was going to use him. They say, "Well, are we actually going to bow down to you?" No way. Now, time has passed. And Joseph now sees those that have victimized him. He's face to face with the offenders. And like many of us, they are a part of our bloodline. This is what happened. He says, "Is my father still living?" He had no way to access this information. He says, but listen to this. But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. First point of the day: forgive in time. I made a note to myself. Think of your role and mindset. Examine both sides, and then think about the mistake that you made that you want to be forgiven of before you hold a grudge. Joseph could have crushed them. There were so many things that he could have done to them to get back at what they had done to him. I mean, here's a guy that he winds up spending 2 years in jail because of them. But he's wiser. And I want you to know that in time, you will be able to forgive. If you seek it. You can use your time two ways. You can use your time to make you hate someone that's done something to you, or you can use your time for forgiveness. You have to understand the true meaning of forgiveness. It doesn't mean that you're going to put yourself in a position where the person can harm you again. But one of the things that you will be able to do with true forgiveness is you will get away from developing a plan to retaliate. Go with me to verse 4. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." When they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt." Joseph is human just like we are. He reminded them of what they had done. Now, prayerfully, none of us have brothers and sisters that have treated us like this. And don't make any reactions or anything like that, because you might not have a ride home. But how many of you all, don't answer me, I'm just talking. You have some brothers and sisters, they just don't play fair. And they do little stuff, you know, they wear your clothes, when you're not home, when they put your clothes on and stuff, and they go in your drawers. And if you grew up like us, it was a lot of us in one bedroom, and they just do all kinds of stuff. They eat your food out of the refrigerator. When you're young, I mean, remember when you first discovered shrimp fried rice? And you first discovered it, you thought it was the best thing in the world. You put it in the refrigerator, and who ate it? Your brothers and your sisters. But what they had done to him, I mean, just imagine your own flesh and blood wanting to kill you. And then saying, okay, well, since we're not going to kill him, we're going to sell him into slavery. They take. You've heard of the many-colored coat that his dad gave him, this robe, and they take that and they put blood all over it and make it seem like he's dead. All out of jealousy. Now, what happens when you're in that frame of forgiveness? What you begin to look at is, could I have done something better? Was any of this my fault? Well, one of the things that I begin to think about, and I know you have if you read this story, you say, wow, David could exercise a little more wisdom, instead of running around telling people, hey, look, I got this cool coat and y'all don't have one. Nah, look what daddy bought me. You're making people mad. And he doesn't have to go tell his mom and his dad, hey, one day y'all gonna bow down. He didn't necessarily have to run and tell his brother, yeah, I'm going to be Lord over y'all. I don't know that he had to do those things the way that he did. I'm not saying that he did anything wrong. What I'm saying is that there comes a time when you're in a state of forgiveness, is you start to look at some of the things that you've done that maybe could have precipitated some of the aggravation. It doesn't mean the person is right in doing what they did, but you're examining yourself just to say, hey, what could I have done better? And so you see where he says, I'm your brother Joseph, and then he reminds them of what they had done to him. Verse 5, and now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here. Whoa. I mean, that's a bold act. He's wiser now. He's probably around 40, between 39 and 41 years old. He hasn't seen them in over 20 years. He's had time to process the situation. And then he tells them, hey, don't be angry with yourself. Now, I wanted to know what this was all about. What it meant to me was that he realized that they were not evil people, but they were driven by circumstances. As I searched the scriptures and started to read other commentaries, I came upon a writing by Josephus. Some of you have heard of him. He was a historian in the days of old. He was born somewhere around 37 BC, but he was a great historian. He wrote the Antiquities, and there's a book on Jews, and book 2, I want to give you the quote from Josephus. So this is not the Bible that I'm reading you, but I want you to know there were other historians of the day that were recording these actions. And this is what Josephus says. He says, and he's talking about the situation with David. He says, so I believe you were not wicked by nature in what you did in my case, but that all has happened according to God's will. What he was saying was this. He was like, you know what? I don't think that you were a bad person because you responded this way. I think that you were in a situation where you just messed up. But I cannot hold this against you forever. You can't. Listen. If I go out here today and I back into one of your cars and I do $500 worth of damage, are you going to restrict me from driving ever again? Maybe I just had a bad day. Maybe whatever the case was, I didn't do the right thing. But all in all, I'm probably still a decent driver. He's saying that I'm not going to put us in a position where we cannot serve together. Verse 6. For 2 years now Joseph is explaining to his brothers how he came to power. He's explaining to them about the famine that brought them down to Egypt. He says, for 2 years now, there has been famine in the land. Now listen to this. Now, they didn't believe that he would prophesy. Now, he's prophesying to them, and they believe him. He says, and for the next 5 years, there will be no plowing and reaping. Now, in verse 41, chapter 41 of Genesis, I told you that Pharaoh had a dream about 7 cows, and he couldn't figure it out. And he went to Joseph while he was incarcerated, and Joseph interpreted this dream for him. And the dream basically said that Egypt was going to have 7 years of plenty of food, and they were going to have 7 years of no food. And so they had to manage themselves so that they had enough food collected in the 7 years that they would be able to sustain themselves in the 7th year of drought. Joseph is the manager of the city. There is no one else qualified to handle this type of business. And so he tells his brothers with confidence that, hey, in the next couple of years, you're not going to be able to plant anything and nothing's going to grow. At this time, they're believers. Verse 7. Now, he sums it all up for them. He says, but God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Go, listen. Heal in time. I want to go back. I believe I missed this point. Rebuild in time. Take me back to verse 5, please, Nobi. Rebuild in time. You're not going to be able to forgive someone overnight and then start working on the relationship. That won't work. That's like finding your long lost sister and then finding out you guys have nothing in common, and now you just found her and that's it. You just know what she looked like. But you're not able to rebuild because you haven't purposed in your heart that God wants us together to do a great work. When you do that, you start to work on. How do you do it? You do it by communication. You do it by talking to one another. If you're in this room and you got people in your family that you haven't talked to in quite a while, I know that I do. It's about being able to communicate, to have patience, don't try to shove the apology down their throat. Because you know how you all get. Well, I apologized to him 5 times, forget that. And then it's over with. And y'all didn't say forget either. I know what y'all said. But what I'm trying to tell you is this. You have to look at the time period that it took to get you where you were or where you are, and devote the same amount of time into the reconciliation. Verse 7, I said to you, heal in time, made a note to myself. Healing, the ability to thrive when faced with obstacles. A peace with your own situation. And an understanding of purpose. You see, there may have been some catastrophic thing that has happened to you that you say, wow, I can't believe this thing has happened to me. I don't like it, so on and so on and so on. But that may be the very thing that has saved your life. That may be the very thing that has put you in a position where you now understand that God is bigger than you. We must heal in time. Your 3 critical points this morning. Let's wrap it up. Forgive in time, to pardon, absolve, or exonerate. Rebuild in time, to restructure or restore. Heal in time, to reconcile. If you're under the sound of my voice and you know that you need to forgive someone, let the Lord minister to you right now. You've been carrying this around way too long. I want you to think of the things that you've done in your life that you want people to forgive you of. And then I want you to start thinking about the people, the person that you just won't forgive. You have to forgive it in order to rebuild it. And you cannot have it healed if it's not rebuilt. I want to pray with you this morning. Those of you who have never given your life to the Lord Jesus Christ, I'd like to pray with you as well. I'm going to say a prayer, and if you say this prayer, if you repeat after me loud enough to hear your own voice, and actually believe it in your heart, then you will be saved. After that, I'm going to pray for those who need to forgive. I want you to brace yourself, because in most cases, I will not ask you to come to the front of this room. But today, I'm going to ask you to come to the front of the room, and I'm going to lay my hands on all of those that need to learn how to forgive. I'm not telling you that you will not get the message because I don't lay my hands on you. So feel free to sit down in your seat if you don't feel comfortable. But I must be obedient to God. Today is the day that you will receive. Those of you that are accepting Christ, repeat after me. Father, in the name of Jesus, please forgive me for my sins and unrighteousness. I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. I believe that he died and that he was raised for my sin. Please forgive me, Lord, and accept me. In Jesus' name.